Hey guys, so let us today discuss as to how the power sector can be analyzed, right? So, um what should be the framework in which we should ideally try to analyze this sector? And the two most common questions that come up is how to go about, like which are the set of things that one needs to look into to really analyze the industry in a best way possible, and how we can get information, which are those data sources where we should fall back on to ensure that we are getting the elements which is going to help us do the analysis in the best way possible, right? So that is the thought process with which I have structured it out, so that you get both the things. One is what are the set of things that you should look into, and which are the places where you should fall back on to get hold of those data elements, post which you can analyze on that and create your own draft your own report, right? So let's start. The first thing, when you are starting to analyze the power sector, you have to first focus as to we need to understand as to what is the trend in power generation, right? In kilowatt hours. So the CAGR growth rate in all the three sections of power generation, whether it's thermal, sorry, there's a spelling mistake over here, whether it's thermal, hydro, nuclear, right? So what is the trend in power generation in each of these areas? And you can fall back on CMI database if you have access to, or the Central Electricity Authority website, right? From there you can gather this piece of information and then do the analysis on that. Then you have to focus on the breakup of installed capacity across regions. So what is the installed capacity of the different types of power generation that we have in context of the different regions, like eastern, western, northern, southern, and so on. So again, you may find this information from the CMI database and Central Electricity Authority website. Then you have to focus on the power deficit numbers, right? So like the demand for electricity exhibits seasonality, right? We all know that. So the demand of power is also a function of as to which is the season, and because in winter season and in monsoon season the demand may be low, will be definitely lower, right? So the demand for the retail consumption generally peaks during the summer months and falls during monsoon months. The seasonality in demand can be captured in power deficit numbers, right? So you need to understand what is the extent of deficit that really happens in power consumption, and for that we need to again fall back on CMI database or Central Electricity Authority websites. Then we need to understand the power understand as to how the power transmission activity is working. So how many substations are there, of what megavolt ampere, from central sector or the state sector, and transmission lines, how extensive the transmission lines have been laid out, right? So that is something which we also need to have understanding of, and again for that you have to source it from the Central Electricity Authority website. Then we need to understand the inter-regional energy transfer, right? So as we know that there is a supply and of power from one region to the other, that happens to power grid. So how that thing is actually happening, who are the primary contributors, again you can fall back on Central Electricity Authority for this piece of information. Then how the power distribution has actually taken place, right, in the urban areas, in the rural areas, right? So you need to have you need to analyze on that. Then what is the extent of transmission and distribution losses, which is called the TND loss, or the aggregate technical and commercial losses, AT&C loss, right? So how this set of losses has phased over a period of time, how that loss is getting to be seen in different regions, right? So we can classify it in that manner. Again, the source of that information would be from Central Electricity Authority. Then the power demand supply position, right? So what is the generally the peak demand, the energy requirement in million units, then peak deficit surplus percentage, right? Then this is in terms of demand, this is in terms of how much it is actually made, what is the energy availability. So all this piece of information you have to really analyze, and that again the a very good source is the Central Electricity Authority. Then we need to understand what are the demand drivers, right? Whether it is shift in consumption patterns, and if there is a shift, why that shift has taken place, the new technologies that has come up, use of captive power, right? So we need to understand what are the demand drivers in this particular industry, then who are the electricity consumers, right? And what is the level of consumption they are undertaking. So it may be the consumers may be industry, high tension, or domestic, or agriculture, or commercial, or industry, low and medium tension, railways, public services. So there are different set of consumers who is actually consuming power, right? So what is the extent of consumption they are doing, and how is generally the trend of such consumption. So again, you may get these pieces of information from CMI, Central Electricity Authority. Then in terms of capacity addition, right? So what is the installed capacity at this point of time, the projected capacity additions, which are new capacities that are coming up in the days to come, or capacity addition target versus achieved. So what had been the target earlier and how much it has been achieved. So a very good source to really get this piece of information is the CMI database, right? Then comes the competitive scenario. So in context of this, in center we know it is NTPC, NHPC, and PCIL, right? Then we have different state bodies. In private we have Tata Power, Reliance Energy, GMR, Jayaprakash. So we can do some analysis in the in context of the competitive scenario, right? Then we also need to understand how the generation is really power generation, I mean to say, is working in context of different companies. So in the generation space, we have companies like National Thermal Power Corporation, NHPC, Nuclear Power Corporation of India, Reliance Infrastructure, Sterlite Energy, Tata Power, PTC in India Limited, Torrent Power, Ratnagiri Gas and Power Limited, Damodar Valley Corporation, MSPL, Suzlon Energy, Naval Lignite Corporation Limited, RPG Enterprises, Satluj Jai Vidyut Nigam, Lanco Infratech, Jayaprakash Power Ventures, Acer Power, CLP Power India Private Limited, Adani Power, GVK Power and Infrastructure, GMR Power Corporation, Ispat Energy Limited, JSW Energy Limited, Patel Energy Limited, Bhushan Energy Limited, and different state electricity boards. In context of transmission, we have Power Grid Corporation of India, Reliance Infrastructure, RPG Enterprises, Tata Power, PTC India Limited, Torrent Power, Ratnagiri Gas and Power Private Limited, Damodar Valley Corporation, Acer Power, Adani Power, and state electricity boards. And in context of distribution, we have Reliance Infrastructure, Tata Power, PTC Limited, Torrent Power, Acer Power, state electricity boards, and so on. So we can go to these respective websites and dig deep in terms of understanding aspects around distribution, transmission, and generation, which can really throw some great insights, right? Then we have to focus on the government regulations, which are those regulatory bodies in the sector like CERC, ACRC, and all. What are the acts, whether there has been some real modification that has come up lately in this set of acts, and what is going to be the impact of those new stuff that has really come up, right? So acts in terms of Electricity Act, Rural Electrification Policy, Tariff Policy, National Electricity Policy, and so on. Then we need to analyze as to as a industry as a whole, what is the nature of financial risk. So we need to understand what is the raw material percentage, salary and wages, SGN expenses, interest expense, PBDI margin, net margin. What is it? Is the classification of this set of things in terms of percentages as an industry. And a very good source for getting this piece of information is the CMI database. Then we need to understand the prices, right? What has been the price trend, say the coal price trend, natural gas price trend or a price trend of crude oil and things like that. So a good source for this is going to be the MC export prices side, right? Then we have to understand the key ratios in context of this industry in terms of, say, gross margin ratio, net margin, current ratio, quick ratio, account receivable days, account payable days, return on net worth, return on assets, return on capital employed, debt equity, net worth to total liabilities, interest coverage ratio, fixed assets turnover ratio, asset turnover ratio, working capital turnover ratio, fixed assets to net worth, and sales to capital employed, right? So this is for the industry as a whole. We need to understand, because then only we would be, once we are able to analyze that this set of aspects from the context of the industry as a whole, then we can really understand how a specific company is doing vis-a-vis the industry standards, right? So I think if you are covering this set of elements in context of the power industry, this is really going to be great insights for the reader, for the objective for which you would be doing this analysis. Maybe it may be a research work, or it may be certain inputs which would add to some decisions in context of funding, or some equity research analysis, or for investing in some company in that particular industry. So the objectives may be very varied and different, right? But then the flow in which you should do this analysis should be something in this order, right? So I hope it really adds value to you. If you really like it, give a like, and if you have any question, please place a question in the comment section. I would be happy to address. And if you are eager to get this template, then just place as file in the comment section. I'll share across this with you, right? So see you in some other in a later video analyzing some other sector. Thanks a lot.